Good evening, everybody. This is probably one of the larger crowds we've had at Troika Gallery, and we know why, because we are featuring two masters of the world, really, and we could not, Laura and I could not be more honored to have Raoul Middleman and Kevin Fitzgerald work together. They both have so many credentials. We always feel humbled that we have been able to represent them for so many years. They've always been top sellers of ours. They're both collected by major collections, and it's just a fabulous opportunity that we now have them together, the two masters, Raoul Middleman and Kevin Fitzgerald.
Well, I would have to first of all correct the record. Jennifer said that you said something to me about, I don't think you ever said that to me in class. In fact, compliments are few and far between. And at one point you may have said, you know, that's not such a bad painting. And I took that to the races. You know, that was good. Because you were, but I will say that in our lives, sometimes there is someone that that you're lucky enough to run into, and that person, you know, helps be a compass point for your life. And without that person, that, you know, your life would have been different. And so that's the truth of what my relationship with Raoul is at Fitzgerald Institute. Yeah, and he you know, taught me. It was just, I didn't know what the heck to do at that point in life, and this gentleman was a fantastic translator of what the world around us was about, and what our place might be in it, what we might be able to do with it, how your life could have more meaning, all those things that art is supposed to be about. And you know, it was a great inspiration, and it was funny as hell too. I mean, he was just irreverent in class, and it was entertaining. It's like, gee, I want to be this. This is a place I'd like to be. You know, why get out there in the real world? You know, stick with this. So it took.
Nothing but horror, fear of the real world. I mean, the idea of art is, I guess, is to wall yourself off into some sort of marginal corner of irresponsibility.
Right.
No, I don't know about that. Well, anyhow, we're going to talk about the sublime. You know, we gave a talk years ago called Mood and Verve, I think it was called. And Kevin was Mood and I was Verve, and we wanted to come up. So I came up with another title, Sublime, and neither one of us really know what that means. And maybe tonight we'll be able to come across some sort of mutual understanding what that means for each of us. So the Sublime was actually a concept, an 18th century concept. Started off with Edmund Burke, you know, who wrote about it, and then Immanuel Kant. And there were three categories of paintings. There was the beautiful, the picturesque, and the sublime. And the sublime was different, say, than the beautiful. The beautiful was some sort of harmony, you know, some sort of balance of color and design and facture. And it was just the opposite with the sublime. I mean, it was like compared to like taking a trip across the Alps, looking in these great gigantic vistas in which the self was sort of made small in comparison to the grandeur of it all. And it could be dark and moody, melancholy. It could be ugly. It could be disjunctive and incomplete. Whereas that's just the opposite of like a kind of Raphael idea of the beauty, which is a balance of antinomies and that sort of thing. So it's an interesting category, I think. I'm not saying that our paintings necessarily, but they might share some of those categories. And I think, I mean, if I think of a poet like William Butler Yeats, the great poet of the 20th century, the Irish poet, you would have think, who goes with Fergus now? And Fergus was the king of the Druids, I think, and he traded his power for a bag of dreams, and he lost power, and like he wonders who would go with him now. And he says, and pierce the deep woods, woven shade, so you're confined, and then the white breast of the dim sea expanding out, and all disheveled, wandering stars. So you go out into space, into this, you know, without boundaries. That's the sublime. Into this vast arena of space. And disheveled is, it could mean the wild kind of Jackson Pollock kind of frenzy of liberty and freedom and all things possible, but it could also mean a kind of despair and chaos. So it's that kind of ambiguity between these two notions that I think that the sublime has, you know, because we lose our consciousness into the other, and yet we need our consciousness in order to be artists. So it's that kind of dichotomy that creates a kind of tension and that kind of artist. And it's not making paintings to be, you know, to be, it's a, I mean,
I'll riff on that, which is right here, right now, because we've had a couple of people say, well, gee, we're so close together, you learn from him, how come it looks so different? And the idea is just what you said, there is a dichotomy, but we're talking about the same time period, the 18th century, 19th century, and if there's such a thing as a history of consciousness, where before we were worshiping weather gods or the natural forces, we put names to them, and later they became personal gods, the mythologies around the world, and then later from that it became an enlightenment. There was the idea of hey, wait a minute, this is up for grabs. We're not sure. We're not really sure. And that was the thing about, right. So that's the Romantic movement in the early 1800s. And there's wonderful poets grew out of there, Keats and Byron and Shelley and, you know, William Blake, you know. And so we're left with, at that point in time in history, so we're at a mystery right now. Nothing's changed. Nothing's happened significantly since, in my opinion, since the early 1800s philosophically. We haven't gotten any further. So we're still all romantics, whether we know it or not. And we refuse to make a decision about something. You know, we can be certain about some things we think, but there's a wonderful doubt about it. And so Raoul and I are both romantics, and we're both singers of the same, out of the same hymn book, you know, which is this ideal that humans have gotten to this point, you know, but don't tell us exactly how something should happen to be. You know, that's the French Enlightenment says we can question this. Humans don't need a priest to go to God. You can kind of intuit these things yourself, like the Druid priest. You can get out on this empty sea and what fills up in you, you know, and that's the Romantic spirit. So we're both singing the same, out of the same hymn book, but we're different hymns, you know. So I'm in the more classical area, maybe the more calm, cool, and collected Zen thing, and you're like grabbing it, like you know, right out there and showing a particularity, where I'm showing a more generality.
That's good. I think that's good. I think that really underlines a lot of the differences and similarities. That's very good, Kevin.
Oh, thanks. Well, it taught me well.
Well, you know, the poet Keats, I was thinking about Keats. Well, first I'll go with the idea of the sublime. You know, I just came back from Europe, and I went to an abbey outside of Arles called Montmajour. I don't know if anybody's been. A huge abbey that's partly ruined. A lot of it's ruined. Walls are down. There were, you know, it's like big walls are in disarray, and yet you get up on, you climb way up, and you look over this valley. It's fabulous. And I was thinking about it. Maybe it's more beautiful as a ruin than it was when it was completed. You know, I mean, I had some idea of that to me. And I was thinking about, well, you could think of Giacometti. You know, he criticized Picasso because Picasso made objects in his work, and like the doubt that you're talking about actually creates a kind of a ruin, which is like the space that surrounds and inhabits a Giacometti. And then I was thinking about Keats the poet, you know. I don't want to make this whole thing some kind of tedious lecture, but these things occurred to me. It said, "What La Belle Dame song?" Ever remember reading that? What ails thee, knight of arms, alone and palely loitering? I mean, what beautiful, palely loitering. Did you ever just think how great that is to put those two words together? Palely loitering. And no sedges withered from the lake, and no birds sing. So he had boom, 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 and palely loitering. You know, so the contrast between that trailing kind of palely loitering and no birds sing. And then he loves this girl who's from the other side of the bourne, the other side. And he can't stay with her because she's immortal, he's mortal, and he comes back, and it ends the way it began, like a sonata form of music, ABA, with ails thee knight of arms, hold on and palely loitering, so forth. Then he writes another poem, Farewell. The very word is like a bell that toll me back from thee to my soul self. So you come back to the self in both cases. And so the poem becomes a kind of wreck, a ruin, a record of an involvement with something beyond the boundaries. But you can't stay there. You can't be there. You need the implements of the banal implements, the frivolous, banal implements of the everyday to kind of hold it in place. It's like the blind thing. You have like a kind of wreckage, a ruin. You know what I mean? In the sense that the struggle somehow becomes the record of an encounter with something beyond what is possible to us humans in a way. And that's very pretentious. I'm not saying I do that, but I think about it.
But there's a little later, then there's the self-consciousness and the almost embarrassment of 20th century sensibility, like Frost would say, here's a guy that's going to walk into the woods at night, and he's a little bit embarrassed, you know, whose woods these are. You know, I think I know, but he will not see me stopping here to watch his woods fill up with snow. So why is that important? You know, why are we so embarrassed about having an epiphany? And it's a wonderful insight into our trouble with encountering, you know, the Romantic movement. If you knew that, outwalk the furthest city light. You know, I've been one acquainted with the night. And he passes a policeman and he drops his eyes, unwilling to explain. You know, explain what? Why? In America, we have to have an explanation. You have to. Yeah,
the boring pragmatics of trying to reduce mystery to you know, the idea of truth somehow for an artist is different than it is for a scientist. You know, Frost also had a crazy poem.
Well, why do you think that? Why do you think he? I'm picking your brain. Why would Frost feel that? Is he embarrassed? I mean, or is he sneaking into the woods at night and he says, he will not see me stopping here to watch his woods fill up with snow. My little horse must think it queer, you know, to stop without a farmhouse near. But what do you think? What do you think he meant by that? I've wondered.
Well, it has an ambiguity in the sense that to stop is to isolate consciousness from the flow of life, and if you lose the flow of life, then you're thrown from the horse. You know what I mean?
Literally, yeah, that's good. He's got the horse in there.
But I mean, Frost had this poem.
And the horse doesn't like it.
He yelled out into the nature, you know, and nothing happened. He threw his voice out into the nature, and then an echo came back one time. In other words, what he threw out was lost forever. But then at one point it came back. And his voice came back, and he says, it pushed the crumpled water up ahead, which I think is a terrific line. Pushed the crumpled water up ahead. So the mystery of himself suddenly coming back from the great, gigantic, the vortex of emptiness and beyond, you know, suddenly comes back on him, you know, as this image that embodies itself in natural phenomena, which is kind of wild. So, I mean, you know, like, I think...
so the nature gods are still alive and well. For me, they are. I mean, when I go to a little group of trees, I can get shook up about it.
Yeah.
Because it looks like something's going on there, like something...
Well, there's squirrels in the trees.
The squirrels are shaking. But you know what I mean? What is going on? I mean, I want to believe that, see? So you bring it right back down, which is good.
Yeah,
but
I mean, we all, you know, like, I mean, artists have, there's a point where we're always trying to explain, you know, what we're doing and what art means. Like, de Kooning said, you can talk about it forever because you never can, you know, what you're really dealing with is, you know, it's so full of contradiction and you know, and you know, like you know, like you can talk about it all you want because you can only, you know, you only touch tangents of its truth, you know, to make the circle that is you, you know. But you know, it's artists. The constant need to kind of talk about something at the same time. The need is there because we're struggling to try to understand our actions, and there's a true, like the romantic, an encounter with something that's almost wordless, you know.
Yeah.
And we have to rely on our instinct, and we have to rely on accident. We have to rely on all these things
and
that
poetry.
are irrational. The idea of the sublime, like for Kant, the beautiful was more a rational kind of thing, you know, it had a moral kind of continuity to it. But the sublime dealt with a certain irrationality, which he tried to explain in the Critique of Pure Judgment, you know, that book.
Right.
You know, and how to deal with that.
Haven't read that
How to
one.
make and maybe no effort could be successful in explaining it, but the attempt is noble, you know, to try to come up with some, he tried to make it almost mathematical, how you can judge something and why is it good, you know.
Right.
But I mean, you can't, you know. I mean, you know, the cultures define it and define it at different times. You know, what was good at one point might be a totally different thing at another point in history. I remember I was looking at a Bellini painting. I don't know, but you know, Bellini was a teacher of Titian and all those guys, Giovanni Bellini. And he did this, early work was very linear. And he has the Annunciation where the angel comes in the room and she's all done with these lines. And it's almost like dishes fell out of the closet, you know, and clattered on the ground because all the folds are like a kind of a sound clatter of linear complexity. And that's the angel coming to announce to Mary the presence of her position and role in history. Okay. Later on, he learned from Titian and Giorgione to model the form and gave it beautiful, kind of soft, you know, chiaroscura,
Glazing.
Fumata, they call it. So fumata, you know, kind of modeling forms. And he did great work that way. Now, from his point of view, he was advancing. He was advancing from a linear point of view, coming out of Middle Ages, into a renaissance of volumetricity and atmosphere and air. Now, if we, not me, but I mean, if the modern guy raised on Chagall and somebody like that, they would prefer the earlier stuff because it's more linear and more flat, more, you know, both of them are great. But for them, the guys that, you know, seeing Chagall in that work or somebody like that, Bellini, actually his early work is more important and more progressive. For Bellini, his later work is more progressive. So the culture that we're in actually defines, you understand what I'm saying? Defines
I do.
What the work's about, you know, in terms, it's related to the culture. And it feeds the needs of the culture, and the culture, you know, feeds it, and gives it a kind of a life which is contingent upon that particular cultural level that the culture's at that point. So, I mean, it's kind of interesting. It's not an absolute. You know, we're not creating an absolute, but
wait a minute. Now, wait a minute. I want to have some absolute. I want to have some. Hold on. That sounds like multiculturalism. No, it's okay, but I do want to have some. I think that we do have some constants through time, and that like beauty is truth, truth is beauty. It's all you know on earth and all you need to know. I mean, the Bellini painting is beautiful, regardless of how it was arrived at, and right. it will continue to be.
Both of them are beautiful.
It won't be thrown in the trash, like, because it's either so wonderful.
Christie's not going to throw it in the trash.
So right, Christie's not because it's so wonderfully made, or it's so true, and that these things are constants, they're ideals, and I think we through poetry, which you brought, you know, started out with, that is a distillation. We read these crappy books that are like 1,000 pages long. And then you can just boil it down to one stanza in a poem sometimes, you know. You could talk about chance and random events in life and how horrible things are and how no matter how hard you plan, things don't quite go the way you want. And then you could say, the race is not to the swift and wisdom not to men of understanding, but time and chance happens to us all. And it's just 6 or 7 words, boom, tells you the whole thing that of all this, you know, is poetry. And that's the power of that. And I think that's what we're trying to do as romantic painters too, is to
partly, yeah.
And
but on
because
the
there
other
are
hand,
these things
you
that
look at a painting by Renoir, and you know exactly when that the culture that's all involved with. You look at a Velázquez, and it's great. It's great. I'm not diminishing that.
Right.
But it's part of that culture. I mean, it's it transcends it. But on the other hand, I don't like an art that becomes so ideal that it transcends the culture.
Well, this is our dichotomy here.
I like art needs to transform itself. Art needs to transform.
We're getting
itself.
somewhere.
Art needs to transform itself, to transcend and transform. But if it goes into some kind of vapid idealism, I can't stand that.
I agree. It can
You
get
know
too
what
far.
I mean? On the other hand, if it gets so particular, it just becomes, and I might be faulted myself on that, kind of a grotesque, idiosyncratic kind of work, then I don't like that either. I mean, it has to have, for me, it's like if it gets too particular, or it gets too general, it loses that tension between the two.
And I agree with you in specific cases, but as a Platonic Judeo-Christian, what I consider myself to be, with accent on Plato first, I think.
Yeats said that Plato was the first Christian.
Yeah, so that there is this ideal outside of this world, and we are so centric of being earthling-centric or earth-centric. I just came across something recently. So Earth is trying to tell heaven what's going on, how screwed up heaven is, but the fact is it's the other way around. Heaven is what informs Earth. And so you can say, well, that sounds like wacko religion. But in fact, you can be very materialistic about it and say, the Earth never originated anything. Where did the Earth come from? The Earth came from heaven. So it's like a poetry, which is in the great scriptures. This Earth came here a long time ago without form and void, and then suddenly things started to happen. So it's like a story of everything that we have here is from somewhere else. And I prefer some ideal world where there are constants, right, and that the art sometimes reflects it.
Figures I might be a little different on that, but I see what you're saying.
Well, it comes to, I saw Camille Paglia do a talk at Salisbury University, and she made a great proclamation that she was an atheist in front of as she was just offhandedly threw that out to the lecture crowd, and I felt like jumping out of my seat. I just wanted to object, because we can't. How could you proclaim that? You can choose to believe that, but why would you? The information's not all in. The insufficient data. So why would you rush to that judgment or that conclusion?
Is all the information in on the religious?
No, not at all. That's the Romantics. It's up for grabs. We don't know. We don't know. For sure.
So you can't really say that either.
You can't really say that either, and that's the balance of that's what the French Enlightenment, I think.
Well, Kant, because he started with the idea of the sublime. He said artists give the rule to nature. I think that's a terrific idea. In other words, after you see a Michelangelo, like after he drew, everybody drew like Michelangelo. I remember I was in art school when I drew like Picasso, and this lady said, everybody draws like. In other words, the artist with a strong personality takes over your imagination. And then you can't see the world except through his eyes. So the ideality that you're talking about might be a consequence of strong artists making kind of ideal concepts that are indestructible.
You can't. Once it's happened the first time, you can't have it the first time. Like the reason Homer is so beautiful is because it's the first time that somebody said the rosy fingers of dawn. Everybody else is going to be influenced by that. It can only happen once. And the same with Genesis.
Everybody else picks their nose with
it. But the same with Monet. You can't look at a puddle of water with aquatic plants without thinking of a Monet painting. That's what I'm saying. It's a shape-shifting thing.
How many people have gone to a museum and seriously for the afternoon, and then come out and it's like the twilight, and you see the trees and the sky, and you start to think of the paint. I mean, it starts to look like what you saw in the museum. It suddenly has the kind of intimacy it didn't have before you went in. Right. So that's where artists give the rule to nature. Isn't that a wild idea? Kant said that. The artist gives the genius. He said genius gives the rule to nature. In other words, the strength of their imagination is so strong that you see the world. The world becomes it's the cookie cutter, you know what I mean? Out of the loose dough of inchoate nature, we give form. We actually create nature. We create ourselves. I once gave a talk about the self at the National Academy. I arranged it. I was putting it together. And my idea was that how the artist, first person in narrative, erases himself, creates himself, or disguises himself. And the guys on the talk, they're really brilliant people, like Larry Day, Finkelstein, Latterman, a whole bunch of people, really bright, Rosemary Beck. And they all said that the artist doesn't have an identity before he starts. He creates himself in the act of doing the work, you know, in the process. So I went to Louis. I didn't like that. I couldn't talk. I was putting it together. I said, well, what about God? Did he create himself when he created the universe? Did he not exist before? He said, that's a very good question. You know, I don't know how to.
You know what Martin Luther said?
What did he say?
Martin Luther said, what was God doing before the creation? He was under the apple tree making switches for people that asked bad questions.
Well, you know what the Talmud said? The Talmud says that when God created the universe, he took a deep breath to make room for himself.
But isn't that this plein air thing today? This thing that's happening. We're trying to believe. I mean, that there's a greater meaning sometimes than just making decorative objects. At least there can be contemplative objects, and that it distracts humans and our culture. It can influence the culture, like you're saying, the paintings. So all these plein air.
And the culture influences it.
Yeah, and all these plein air painters that are here. This is a better part of civilization. The angels of our better nature, perhaps, are here for a while. And then if we filled ourselves with this kind of activities, how much less time would there be to do all the destructive things? You know, so I think there is a practical usage, you know, of the art. Yeah, it's not just a you know, a what?
That's a good way to look at it. That's very good. Yeah.
So.
I don't know what else to say. No, I mean, the idea of fluidity also, I mean, for me, I mean, Kevin has this kind of ideal, kind of merging luminosity that, like Rothko, which is a kind of a sublime, deals with the sublime, which holds the contingency of nature into some sort of, you know, of a fragile stasis, you know, with the wave, for example, where there's a luminous breaking into consciousness of something that's moving, but held in suspension, in a beauteous suspension. And for me, it's the constant change of things that I'm trying to follow. I'm always saying goodbye and hello to things, you know what I mean? They're constantly escaping and then coming into being. So mine's more about fluidity and change, which gives a kind of melancholy to the work. And yours has a melancholy too. I think there's a kind of darkness in the sublime that you capture. And the darkness is maybe unavailing futility to you create this moment, but this moment is such a, you know, it's that fragile moment of art which holds the possibility of something.
Well, I'm still the guy in your class. I'm there right now. I mean, I'm 25 years old or whatever, and I'm trying to figure out. I'm trying to still do what you do. And a couple of these paintings, I tried to jack it up a little bit and be not so sublime and just make some jabbing marks and like you did the sword. He used to teach sword fighting in class. He wouldn't teach. He would be like fencing and say it's slashing marks, it's jabbing, and it's not just standing there going do like this. It's a whole bunch. It's a whole ballet. Which
that's nice. You think that way. I remember there was a teacher at the Maryland.
It's a physical thing.
Named Dick Ireland, and I had a dream once when Dick Ireland was standing in front of a theater, and he had in the old days he had these guys dressed up in all this kind of a Philip Morris kind of garb, you know what I mean, and they announcing the movie. You got to see this, Raoul. He told me you got to see this movie. So I went. It was a movie about Manet, the painter. And it was like the whole movie screen was this big canvas, like in the Velázquez, Las Meninas. You know, it was like the back of the canvas. And every now and then, a guy that looked like Douglas Fairbanks came out, and he curled his mustache, and the sword was a brush with paint flipping off of it. And then he'd go back, and you see paint, and you hear a lot of commotion, and then he'd come out again and do that. And that was supposed to be, Manet.
Not the way it happened. Right, right, that's funny.
I mean, it was that dream, like it was just, the movie was a movie about Manet, and it was Douglas Fairbanks playing Manet, you know what I mean? And, there was this.
That's great.
So, what I do is a kind of supercilious kind of swordplay with the brush against trying to stab the and try to hold in some sort of concept the kind of implacable kind of motion of life, which is constantly moving on, you know, and constantly moving on, and then you try to nail it.
And trap it in one mark. Just trap it.
You know, so that's maybe my struggle. And then Kevin's struggle is he believes in this religious ideal, you know, this thing underneath appearances.
I suspect.
You know, this kind of luminous presence, you know, that's probably the only thing that has integrity in all the stuff of life. He's trying to hold that thing. It's so precious. And that gives him the poetry that creates his work. So, I mean, there's different ways to come into the battle, you know. But no artist, every artist has a different, you know, thing. I mean, if you read, say, Proust, you know, his sentences are long, involuted, and they back into each other. Or Kafka, he says, I start out and I want to go to the bridge, but he can't get to it, he comes back. So there's this torturous thing that goes back and forth. And then you read somebody like Hemingway or Camus, it's like these short, brutal sentences that go from the isolation of moment to moment. One is a moment is constantly, you know, infringed upon by all these other moments that obscure its direction to some extent. And the other is the kind of bleak isolation of one moment to the next, unconnected. Both of them have a tragic sense to them, and both of them have a melancholy to them, but they're quite different. And every artist comes up with a different coordinate dealing with life, which is so multiple and complicated, and that we all have our limits, you know, and our limits become our power. You know, and that's where we make our style. That's where we get our energy to be ourselves as an artist. It's out of that limitation that we have, and not to try to be everything, at the same time trying to be everything, you know, and that gives us that kind of ambiguity, whatever it is.
Well, I like that kind of mystery, because you said that in class too. I remember that very well. Is that, well, no, this was what you said. You said that as you fail, what your intentionality is.
Right.
You know, it's a series of that.
That's right.
What's your style going to be? What's my style going to be? What style should I do? And dumb questions like that you'd have to entertain. And you would say, well, just keep doing this. And it's a series of failures. And what's left over after all your failures is what maybe your style is. Maybe.
Right.
You know, it's like Gauguin said, keep on painting, and sooner or later your talent will be recognized if you have any. You know, but but Gauguin was a smart. You know, he was a rough guy. But the idea that it's embracing the failure, and you gave that all the time in class.
Well, it's our humanity.
Yeah,
too.
And that was a good thing.
We're all failures, whether we paint or not.
Absolutely.
Raoul, Kevin, this is wonderful. I mean,
We really thank you.
we really do
Thank you.
thank you. This has been a great experience. And now that you hear where all these paintings come from, doesn't it add another dimension to their work? I think that's fabulous.
Thank you.
And that's what we're all about. Adding dimension to the world and to our art. And so we thank you very much.
Thank you, Kevin.
Thank you. Thank you.